if the bank auditor knows that the bank did not fulfill the bank loan agreement or that the bank is insolvent, this must be disclosed in the auditor's opinion, or a dirty opinion must be given. A dirty opinion means the bank is insolvent or involved in a fraud, or that they never legally own the promissory note. The user of the bank financial statement need to know the truth so that they can make informed investment decisions. Is the bank insolvent? To determine this, we need to know what insolvent means. The Dictionary of Banking Terms defines insolvency as the inability to pay debts as they mature. If further, it further explains insolvency as not being able to pay debts. A bank is considered insolvent if the ratio of liabilities to assets is zero or near zero. If assets over liabilities is zero, more liabilities than quality assets available to pay the liabilities, the bank is considered insolvent. If the bank records the promissory note as a loan from the alleged borrower to the bank, and if the bank repays the loan in its equivalent in kind, meaning the principal and interest, the bank never has the money to repay the loan, making the bank insolvent. If it is insolvent, the bank never has actual cash value to loan to the borrower to obtain the promissory note. From this book, you have learned one thing. If everyone went to the bank and closed out their checking account, cut up their credit cards, and only used cash, the bank would have to pay all the debt they owe borrowers. The government would have to print United States notes cash, interest free, or it would be obvious to everyone that the leaders of this nation represent the banking interest. If the bank does not print new Federal Reserve notes, can the bank convert its assets to pay all the bank debt? No. There is not enough cash to pay the bank debt. They would, by definition, be insolvent because they are unable to convert assets into cash to meet financial obligations. Are the banks insolvent? Did they loan you cash or give you a liability owing you cash? If they are insolvent, how can they have loaned you cash? If you study the words insolvency and bankruptcy, you will find that the bank can never be insolvent because they never intend to pay the bank liabilities. They only trade the bank liabilities from one checking account to another by check. You can argue that if everyone demanded the bank pay the bank debt owed for the promissory notes by demanding cash, the bank is insolvent unless they create more debt by printing more Federal Reserve notes. The only alternative is having the government print cash interest free by printing United States notes. If the bank is not insolvent because they never intended to pay the bank debt, it proves that the bank never loaned money and never intended to loan you actual cash value to obtain your promissory note. If they admit that they are insolvent, they could not make the loan. If they claim they are not insolvent, they must prove that they obtained the promissory note for free. What creates inflation? Increasing the money supply beyond the goods and services available causes inflation. We have all heard stories of a loaf of bread costing 10 cents or a fancy house costing 35,000 years ago. Why did the price go up? It is best illustrated in this example. If the nation had only $100 and 100 loaves of bread, the obvious price of the bread is $1. If the money supply is increased to 200 and only 100 loaves of bread are available, the price of the loaf of bread is increased to $2. The bread maker gets smart and produces an extra 100 loaves of bread, creating a total of 200 loaves of bread, and the price of a loaf drops to $1. As long as you add production, as you add dollars to the money supply, there may be little, if any, inflation. What causes recession and depression? Decreasing the money supply causes recession and depression. There is no difference between a recession and a depression except for the amount of money in circulation. If the U.S. if the U.S. constitutional banking system our founding fathers created was followed, there would be no recession nor depression in America. Congress would be sure that there was an adequate supply of money and not allow one group to manipulate the money supply and profit from it. It is the bank's policy to create rescissions in order to increase their profits. Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago Applications Modern Money Mechanics, page 6, gives the bankers instructions on how to create a bank-induced recession or depression. Did the banks create the depression in 1929, the Great Depression? Lewis McFadden, chairman of the House Committee on Banking and Currency from 1920 to 1931, accused the Federal Reserve for creating the crash. It was not accidental. It was carefully contrived occurrence. The international bankers sought to bring about a condition of despair here so that they might emerge as rulers of us all. See bibliography number 8, page 191. Congressman Charles Lindbergh, the famous flyer father, about the Federal Reserve Bank shortly after it was created. Depression will be significantly created. See bibliography number 2, page 124. Thomas Jefferson said, if the American people ever allow private banks to control the issue of currency, first by inflation and then by deflation, the bank and the corporations that grow up around them will deprive the people of all property until their children will wake up homeless on the continent their fathers conquered. See bibliography number 12, page 247. These three famous people knew how the banks created depressions using the European banking system. They warned the nation to use only U.S. constitutional banking system, yet we did not listen. Today, our plan is to warn the whole nation so the banks cannot crash the economy, creating another depression and forcing us into a cashless society. How did the banks create the Great Depression? From 1923 to 1929, through alleged loans, the banks increased the money supply by 62%. Easy money created a business boom. Banks created money and loaned it to the borrowers wishing to buy stock. You could only buy $1,000 in stocks for $100 down and finance other $900 with a 24-hour call loan from the bank. The stock prices went up and up, fueled by the money the banks created and the loaned out to buy the stock. The insiders sold their stock at a great profit and bought the government bonds or held cash, waiting for the crash. In unison, the banks called the 24-hour broker call loans due. The non-bankers were forced to sell their stock to pay for the loans. Everyone sold and the crash began. Within a few weeks, $3 billion of wealth vanished. The wealth of one of the insiders, Joseph P. Kennedy, grew from $4 million in 1929 to $100 million by 1935. It is no secret, sell your stock on the high side and buy on the low side. After the crash, cash was scarce. Those who were on the inside, those who sold their stocks before the crash and held cash, now bought companies for 10 cents on the dollar. Great fortunes were made at the misfortune of others. Between 1929 and 1933, the Federal Reserve Bank reduced the money supply by 33%, thereby creating the Great Depression. It is wicked enough that the bank never risks or invests 1 cent of legal tender or other depositors' money and loans you your own money at interest. It is even more sinister when the bank controls the gambling odds and forces you to lose at their whim, taking all your property for their added profit. The bank receives your promissory note and lien for free, receives your monthly loan payments for free, and then forecloses and receives the equity on your home or farm for free. The bank policy is to create recessions to force a percentage of people to default, putting you out on the streets. All the European banking system does is shift the wealth from you to the bank. By buying foreclosed properties, judges, police, and lawmakers can make a fortune. Today, the same situation exists as did just before the Great Depression. Will we learn our lesson and save the nation by exposing the bankers? I fear bankers more than standing armies. President Thomas Jefferson said, I sincerely believe that banking institutions are more dangerous to our liberties than standing armies. See bibliography number 10, page 20. President Andrew Jackson said that the bank would be more formidable and dangerous than the naval and military power of the enemy. See bibliography number 7, page 308. Founding Father James Madison said, history records that the money changers have used every form of abuse, intrigue, deceit, and violent means possible to maintain their control over the government by controlling the money and its issuance. See bibliography number 8, page 79. If the government issued United States notes interest-free, and if the banks could not create money, then the banks could not create war for profit, running up huge government debts in order to receive the interest. If the banks could not create money, they could not create recessions nor depressions, nor obtain the liens on the nation's assets for free. Wealth buys favor with the media. It can be used as social engineering to change the way that people think. The media elects lawmakers. The lawmakers know that if they wish to be reelected, they must vote the way of those who finance them into office. In effect, the one with the most money wins. If the banks create the money, they win. They control the nation. One day after I was done conducting seminars for certified public accountants, I talked to a man who identified himself as the head accountant of a very large bank. I said, you know, all the bank loans you grant are fraud, right? Without any hesitation, he said, I know. I said, are you afraid of going to jail? Again, without hesitation, he said, no. I asked, why not? He said, the banks control the judges. We have them elected. If they want a job, they have to cooperate with us. We control both the media and who is elected to office. The only thing we fear is the population learning what we have done to them. If they wake up, we will have to flee the country, he laughed. I will never forget what he said. This is why courts have thrown out perfectly good cases against the banks. The banks can control the judges, but not the brochures. Brochures and small books were used to begin the Revolutionary War and fight the British. China used brochures to win a nation from communism. Brochures will now be used to set America free from the banks. If a foreign army invaded America and won the war, they would control the country, create new laws, and we would pay taxes to them. What is the difference between a military army conquering us and a bank and the banks obtaining the nation's debt and property, forcing us to pay them interest on all the money they create? The bank received the spoils of the war without firing one shot or spending 1 cent. The banks control the government, the lawmakers, the judges, and the police. The fact is, they use judges and the police to obtain 40% of the nation's income tax as interest on the national debt and the liens they obtained. Either you give the conqueror your labor for free, or they foreclose and you take your assets. It is much easier to conquer and control a people who think they are free. The media has labeled those who object to this as anti-government so that other citizens will not join them in the fight for their freedom. A nation is not sovereign if they do not have a treasury printing sovereign money, interest-free. The banks proved that this by forcing on the national debt, making Congress trustees of the national bankruptcy. The creditor owns the nation in bankruptcy. This is the secret not disclosed in court. We will be set free if we make the banks repay our loans to them, or make the private banks pay the debt due us. All we have to do is spread the truth to enough Americans in order to compel them to correct the problem. We cannot be conquered if the truth is revealed. It is up to every American to get the truth out so we can correct the problem. If even half of all Americans understood this and agreed to help correct the problem, we would be free Americans refusing to be conquered. When we come back, we'll be talking about led into the trap without knowing it, deceived and being deceived.